You know the landlord rang my front door bell. I let it ring for a long, long spell. I went to the window and peeked through the blind and asked him to tell me what was on his mind. He said, money, honey, yes, money, honey, yes, money, honey, if you want to stay here with me. And welcome to another edition of Why Don't Economists here on BCB 106.6 FM with Marie McCary, where we investigate other paradigms of economics. Well, it definitely seems to me that the big multinational banks and the big multinational corporations are not working for the benefit of the people, are not working for people's benefit. And we need to get back to running things within the localities where we can watch over what's really happening. And I've recently been investigating what's been happening in Preston in Lancashire. It's very, very interesting. They've looked at what was happening in Cleveland in the USA, and they've looked at the Mondragon model in Spain. They're doing tremendously well in just a few years of keeping money and investment within Preston. So I'm very happy today to be interviewing Dr. Julian Manley, who's a research fellow at the University of Central Lancashire and is very much involved in this model. And I'll leave it to him to explain it to you. But of course, I start, as always, by asking him, how would he complete the question, why don't economists?
I'd say, why don't economists try placing people before money?
That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah, I think that people make the world go round before money makes the world go round.
Yeah, and the economy is man-made, so why not make it for the benefit of the people rather than the elite?
Yeah, and that's really what the Preston model is all about, really. I mean, you've heard of the Preston model, haven't you?
Well, that's what I'm interviewing you about, so tell us more.
Well, beginnings were driven by the really desperate financial situation that was confronting Preston after the financial crash in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
But, what they wanted to do in Preston and the essential demand, if you like, of the Preston model, is actually this idea of making money work for the people of Preston rather than for unknown people or bodies or corporate entities who might be investing in Preston with no care or thought about the people of Preston.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, a typical thing, right? Like when a big chain supermarket invests in a place like Preston, very little of the generated money actually remains in place. So, I mean, the Preston model in different ways is really about encouraging a profitable wealth-generating system that encourages wealth building and retention. In other words, money for the local people.
Right, yes. And also when big companies like Serco take over local services, then where does that profit end up? It's a massive multinational, non-tax paying company.
Exactly. All this money just floats away from the city, and it's not a rich place, and we just can't afford to have money disappearing forever, basically, for no reason that we can understand and for no benefit of the city. And of course, we're up against a lot of things in Preston, which lots of other areas in the UK are up against, but maybe we feel it even more in a place like Preston due to the severity of the austerity cuts and the various issues we've had here with tackling poverty. I mean, huge amounts of public money has had to go out into bailing out the financial system in 2008. The austerity measures have meant a continuing squeeze on most of the population. There's very little investment in a place like Preston from outside. Productivity is pretty weak. And a special issue in Preston is that if we do want to regenerate the local economy, that normally begins with small businesses, and bank lending to small businesses is absolutely minimal.
Oh, yes. I mean, we bail out the banks and they don't help small businesses that are more likely to employ local people with the money lent and to have innovation. It's ridiculous, really.
Absolutely.
We need, as I keep saying on this programme, we need local banks, local public banks preferably. Yes, so where did you look for inspiration to change things?
What we thought is we needed to create something here to stimulate a new way of thinking and give greater scope for communities to develop in Preston, and we needed to do it with creativity and leadership and with knowledge of place and a love of the place, a pride of the place, because we haven't got anything else in Preston. I mean, the local council has been savagely affected by the cuts and austerity. And so we just had to think out of the box, really. And the first thing that we thought about was looking to ideas imported from Cleveland, Ohio. That's the work of Ted Howard and the Evergreen cooperatives in Cleveland. And there's a model there which encourages the development of community wealth building. And we took a particular aspect of that model, which Ted called the anchor institutions. We had a look at that as an asset that is in Preston, which maybe we could tap into. Because, I mean, clearly there's sources of wealth and community and civic pride in Preston that are big institutions that have been in Preston for a long time, and they're going to be in Preston for a long time in the future as well. For example, where I work, the University of Central Lancashire, you've got the hospital, you've got Lancashire Constabulary, you've got Community Gateway Housing Association, Preston's College, the Lancashire County Council and Preston City Council itself. I mean, these institutions, we call them anchor institutions following the Cleveland model because they're big institutions that are not going to go anywhere. They have, what's called sort of sticky capital. They're big employers. They have a significant buying power, and they are in Preston. So we look to them to help us solve some of the issues in Preston. And the main issue related to the anchor institutions was the problem that 61% of spend from those anchor institutions was leaking out of the Lancashire economy. So we thought to ourselves, well, how could we try and retain or regain some of that money that was leaking out of the economy? So what we did is we encouraged these local anchor institutions to buy more locally. We asked them how they could do that. We encouraged them to change their idea about procurement. We encouraged a sort of change of culture and feeling in procurement officers and institutions, tried to sort of make them feel that it would be possible, and not just possible, but it would be encouraging and enlightening and make them better partners and neighbours in the local community.
Was there not a problem with EU legislation which makes these local institutions have to put out contract Europe-wide, really, so these big multinational companies like Capita and Serco and such like, they can always put in a better bid than some local business?
That's right. There are issues about that, and that's why some people actually think that maybe with Brexit there's an opportunity in the future to change those laws and make it easier for these anchor institutions to buy locally. But nevertheless, you'd be surprised how a bit of creative thinking and a bit of thinking out of the box, how it is possible to increase to a certain extent local procurement within the law. An example would be if you've got lots of buildings like the university has, and you want a window mended or a doorknob changed, you could quite easily ensure that work was done locally instead of the whole thing being under a massive contract from a big provider from outside Preston.
So you'd put out more separate contracts so that it might be possible for local companies to bid on them?
Yeah, that's right. And there are upper limits as well. So below a certain amount of money can quickly give a job to a local person. And very often we found that some of the issues about local people not wanting to get involved in dealing with the anchor institutions is because they're worried about having to fill in all the forms. We've got a big bureaucracy and administration in a massive institution like the university. And what we've said is, well, maybe we'd be prepared to give a bit of training to people to try and help them,
Of course, the big, massive Sercos and Capitas and G4Ss of the world have whole departments to fill in these forms and know exactly what to do to get the contracts.
Exactly right. So very often, you might have local people who are prepared to bid for contracts, but they just think it's beyond them. They don't even imagine it's possible, and they're worried by the paperwork and so on. So maybe we can help them out in that way.
But what about? I mean, as you were saying about local banks, they might have to invest in more capital, say there were a laundry or something, to do the contract, and it's hard to get even with the contract in place, it's still hard to get the loan money off the banks in the UK.
Yeah, that's right. And so at the moment we're working out different ways of trying to solve those problems. I mean, ultimately, the way we want to solve that problem is by creating a local community bank or a local cooperative bank, or who knows, maybe both. So we have plans to try and support the development of a Lancashire community bank on the one hand. So there are teams of people looking into that possibility right now.
And I believe you've got Richard Werner on board.
That's right. So following his model of the Hampshire Community Bank,
yes,
we're looking into the possibility of creating a Lancashire Community Bank, and its headquarters would be in Preston, maybe, for example. We'd like that to happen, but it would obviously be serving the greater Lancashire region, and we'd like to be able to ensure that there would be a priority or favourable contracts available for lending money to cooperatives, which is part of the whole Preston Model idea.
Yeah, well, the local banks in Germany, their ethos is what provides the most local benefit.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, we also know that in Germany, the financial institutions were safer from the financial crash, in part because of the distribution of lots of local banking, which we didn't have in this country.
Yes, and they're not allowed to speculate and not allowed to be taken over. It's such a better model, perfect for this sort of initiative that you're doing in Preston. Fits in very well.
Absolutely, and there's also actually an alternative now as well, which we're thinking about too, which is actually a cooperative bank. And I mean a proper cooperative bank, not a bank like the co-op bank we have now.
Which isn't cooperative anymore anyway.
No, exactly, with investments in hedge funds and so on. So, but a new cooperative bank, which would actually be run by the members with one member, one vote. And, we're looking into this with someone called Tony Greenham, and he was here just the other day to talk about this. So we're very proactively involved in trying to develop these things as part of the Preston model from various different angles all at once.
Well, you definitely need local banks of whatever persuasion, as many as possible, to build community wealth, definitely, yes.
Absolutely, and you need banks who are prepared to lend to SMEs. The bigger banks are not prepared to do that, and even less to cooperatives. I mean, our plan in the Preston model is to have a growing network of cooperatives, of worker-owned cooperatives. Our model for this is the Mondragon cooperatives in the Basque Country.
Yes.
And to get those going, what could be better than a cooperative bank? So the high street banks are not going to lend money to those cooperatives, that's for sure. So we're well aware of that.
There's so much research that money, every pound lent to a small or medium business, provides more employment and more innovation than some big company where it just goes down a hole, really, and provides minimal benefit to the real economy, you know.
Yeah, exactly right. And of course, job creation is one of the most important things for us as part of the Preston Model, and as part of the Preston Cooperative Development Network, which is the network that creates and supports cooperatives within Preston. We take our inspiration from Mondragon in this case. You know that their motto is humanity at work. What that motto sort of really emphasizes is the sovereignty of labor over capital. So the number one aim of the worker-owned cooperatives in Mondragon, and the number one aim of the cooperatives we want to create in Preston, is the labour, is the creation of employment. And any money that's created is there to support the creation of labour and to support the principles and values of cooperative working.
And of course, it can't be said it doesn't work, because Mondragon was set up in 1956. It employs now, 74,000 people. Absolutely. In finance, retail, manufacturing, services, all kinds of things. They're a very big washing machine manufacturer, I believe. And, and it's been very, very successful.
Well, this is it. And this is what we've got to remember. Those people, when you say they're employed, they are member owners, right? And they say we've got to try and understand that the nuanced and important differences. When you're working in those kinds of organizations, you're not exactly an employee. You are a member owner, just like the person working next to you, and just like the person working in the office, and just like the person sweeping the floor. Every single person is a member owner. And that has fantastic implications for the whole idea of democracy and how you run an organisation of that kind.
Well, we have it in England in the John Lewis Partnership and Waitrose and everything, and you can't say they're a failure.
Exactly. I mean, John Lewis isn't exactly a cooperative, it's a partnership, but it's something along those lines.
It's the workers who receive a share of the profits, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And in the worker-owner model, when the profits come in to the organisation, it's the workers who decide what they want to do with that money.
Well, I often think it's ironic that it's the rich that like to shop in John Lewis and Waitrose because they like the service, which is much better service because they're owner workers. But this idea of owner workers could be in many, many services.
Absolutely. And it makes such a difference when that money comes in to those owner workers who live locally, and every single penny is staying locally. It's staying either with the workers who are local, or it's being put into some kind of investment which is local, or it's being shipped out to support some local community project, for example, but it's all staying local. Whereas if you've got a factory that is an investment from abroad, all that money will go out to some shareholder somewhere who knows nothing and cares nothing about Preston and the local community.
Well, that's right. But it's not even the shareholders I blame. It's the management who are only ever interested in short-term profits, not even interested in the long-term health of the company, and it's not working the present model at all, really.
Not at all.
When it gets to the big companies, instead of using money to increase wages, they buy back their own shares so that they have a better bonus. Terrible.
And the disparity between the top wages and the lowest wages is a scandal as well. We're all scandalised, aren't we, these days, by the bonuses that top bosses get. I mean, it's a proper outrage. And another advantage of the worker-owned cooperative is that the pay differentials between the least skilled worker and the top manager is either equal, there is no difference, or it's a very small difference. Now, in Mondragon, it's a difference of about 6 levels from the least skilled to the person in the office, you know.
And, I think there should be some difference, but it doesn't have to be hundreds, which it is at the moment.
Exactly right. Because that doesn't produce a good society. That's what I said about people. You know, we want people to benefit from this, and it's not a benefit to society when there are huge wage differences between one person and the next.
So how's it going in Preston then with this model? You've been doing it a few years now.
Yeah, well, these things don't happen overnight.
Oh, no,
so
no.
we started round about 2012, 2013, something like that. And, we've got some important results. For example, in the financial year 2012-13, only 5% from the anchor institutions was spent in Preston and 39% in Lancashire. But in 2016 and 17, instead of 5% spent in Preston, that's gone up to 19%.
Well, big difference.
Big difference. And in Lancashire, even more. Instead of 39%, it's gone up to 81%.
Wow.
So that is a pretty impressive increase in local spending.
Very impressive in a short number of years.
Yeah, it really is, yeah. And then, of course, we've reached a stage where a lot of the anchor institutions are saying, right, okay, like these figures say, we used to spend 39%, and now we're spending 81%. And we've got to a stage where the anchor institutions say, okay, well, now we can't spend locally anymore because there's no one to sell us the stuff. So what we're doing now is we've identified the gaps in the local economy where the anchor institutions say they can't buy locally anymore. And what we're doing is we're going to see if we can fill those gaps with local worker-owned cooperative businesses. So then the anchor institutions will be able to buy more locally. But when they do buy more locally, they'll be able to buy it from worker-owned cooperatives that are completely rooted locally as well. So it's a win-win situation, whichever way you look at it.
That's fantastic. Is there any capacity for local pension funds to sort of help fund this at all?
Yeah, there's an idea that pension funds can be used to start up the bank, either the community bank or the cooperative bank.
Yeah, because there's some pension funds looking for more sustainable, ethical things to invest in.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot going on all the time. So, really exciting.
It's very exciting.
And we've created the Preston Cooperative Development Network, which is itself runs as a cooperative. And the idea of that network is to provide a forum for connecting the new cooperatives together so that the cooperatives are supporting each other with resources. They're not competing against each other. So they're able to generate wealth, but they're able to generate even more wealth when they're interconnected with each other. So it's what the Mondragon Corporation call the intercooperation between cooperatives, the idea of cooperating rather than competing with each other. And so the Preston Cooperative Development Network is all set up and ready to go to develop that kind of network.
Yeah, there's a lot of back office kind of things, accountancy, filling in the forms to win the contracts, all that kind of thing could be shared, that knowledge.
Absolutely. All sorts of things can be shared. This whole model affects us in more ways than you think at first. If you do this local model, you're also friendlier with the environment. There's less trains, there's less buses, there's less planes because it's just round the corner.
Yes, and people are more connected with their food. Hopefully, eat more healthily if it's grown locally, and they can go and visit the farms even and see them.
Absolutely. We have a small co-op that works as part of Gateway Housing Association. Gateway Housing Association has about 6,000 tenants. And they work as a cooperative, so they have tenants on their governing board. They have a scheme whereby a co-op organises fresh food and vegetables to be delivered to the tenants, for example.
Oh, very good. And what do the politicians, the local politicians of the different parties, how do they look on this?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and that's a question that really gives me a lot of hope for the future, because the thing about cooperatives, and I think we need to sort of look at this objectively, the thing about worker-owned cooperatives is that from whatever political angle you want to take it, it's got something to offer. Now, how many things are there in life that you can say that about? It's in politics,
Yeah.
So, if you're on the left, then you're talking about solidarity among workers working together and achieving something among themselves without being dominated by capitalist bosses. Okay, so that would be a left-wing perspective. From a right-wing perspective, it's the most fantastic example of an entrepreneurial commitment, where someone who's got an idea gets together with others and creates wealth and employment just because that person's had a great idea. It's a fantastic entrepreneurial project. So whether you're on the right or on the left, you've got something attractive there about this particular model. And indeed, the politicians in Preston, there's been interest from Labour through to Lib Dem through to Conservative. It may be that at the moment there's more interest in one area than others, but there has been interest from all the political parties.
Well, the thing is, as a local politician, you want to have more power to do things locally to help the locality, and you will have more power if this model is spread even further.
Yeah, that's right.
So are the local people, are they engaging with the Preston model, supportive of the politicians who are pushing it?
Yeah, you know what it's like. I mean, there are always people who are sort of more aware of what's going on from that perspective, and others who are maybe not so aware. And little by little, people are becoming more and more aware of it because there's been quite a bit of publicity about the Preston model. And as a matter of fact, it was really interesting to me to see that when we hosted a Guardian live event, you know, the Guardian, the newspaper, they hosted a public event here at the University of Central Lancashire, and they charged £5 a ticket, and the event was billed Preston, how to fix the city or something like that, and it was about the Preston model. Now, you would have thought that maybe that's not such a crowd puller necessarily, but actually there were nearly 400 people from the area, from Preston, came and paid their £5 to listen to this debate. So it shows that there's more and more awareness and more engagement with the model, yeah.
Excellent. And are there other councils looking at this now? You're the standard bearer, really, for this, in the UK anyway.
Yeah, there are. I gave a talk in Rochdale recently. I know that there's going to be some talks in Bradford related to the model. So there is growing interest, yeah.
Oh, I want to know more about the Bradford ones.
Of course you will, yeah. I can put you in touch, you know.
Yes, and I believe you're encouraging graduates to stay in Preston, work in this area.
Yeah, this is another incredibly exciting aspect of the Preston model. So the university is interested in the principles and values of cooperative models. So that's something that we like to encourage among our undergraduates. But ultimately, what we want to do is we want to provide job opportunities for our third-year undergraduates so that when they graduate, they're able to find work. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to make sure that they find work and stay in Preston, because the university is in Preston. The university is a community member in Preston, and it would be great if our graduates could find work in Preston and develop their own graduate community in Preston and become alumni who remain in Preston and have a relationship both with the community and with the university. And the way we're hoping to do this, and we've begun this already with a digital co-op, is to create cooperatives using the skills of the students, providing business plans for them with our business hub called Propeller, and encouraging them then to stay in Preston, because we'll have a relationship between the Preston Cooperative Development Network and the business hub in the university called Propeller.
Oh, that's fantastic. There's so many benefits. There's just no downside really at all, is there, to the whole idea of making things more local?
Absolutely, yeah. Making things more local and more ethical and fairer as well.
Yeah, and the ultimate motivation to be to help people locally, not about the financialisation shenanigans of the multinationals.
And to help people locally, but also for people to help themselves locally, to empower people.
Well, that was really interesting hearing about the Preston model, and very much think that it needs to be expanded to other areas of the country, not least here in Bradford, and I'll be doing what I can to help that. So I have a YouTube channel now, Why Don't Economists, where a lot of my previous interviews are archived. And so this is Marie McCary saying goodbye for another 4 weeks. And I'll leave you again with Money Honey by Ella Mae Moss.
You know the landlord rang my front door bell. I let it ring for a long, long spell. I went to the window and peeked through the blind and asked him to tell me what was on his mind. He said, money, honey, yes. Money, honey, yes. Money, honey, if you want to stay here with me.